I remember when I was sitting in your seats not that long ago, and I understand that I am what is keeping you from free alcohol. That never happened when I was here. We'll have another conversation about that later. So I'll try and be quick. Sam Smith sang about love, heartbreak, the need for a long-term relationship. I spent the last 10, 15 years of my career trying to sit in the policy world, sucking up all the brilliance that resides in these academic heads. And I have to say to you that the relationship is a little bit more like heartbreak. There's not enough love. Why? What can we do about it? I want to share with you 3 lessons from the last 15 years, I guess, of my work. Talk with you about a couple of ideas of the skills that are necessary in order to influence policy, and then talk a little bit about who's to blame and what they can do about it. And I'll give you a hint. Their title starts with Admiral. So the first lesson, you've heard this before, but I'll say this again. Influencing policy is hard work. Not that many people, Barack Obama, Vladimir Putin, can walk into a room and say, listen, this is what you should do, and this is how you should do it, and then you can leave, and the people will take your instructions forward and do exactly what you told them to do. That doesn't work for the rest of us, and I hate to break it to you, to those of you considering academic careers, it's probably not going to work for you, unless one of you is going to be a president, in which case, hi, my name is Rahul. It's a lot of hard work. You have to understand the institution. You have to understand the culture. You have to understand the actual problem that people are grappling with it and the nature of that problem. And as with all relationships, and maybe all things in life, except military intervention in the Middle East, the more that you put into the relationship, the more that you will get out. Right? So it takes time. You've heard that. We need a lot of work before anything happens. But change is not linear, and that's the second important lesson. Change doesn't happen in sort of easy, straight lines. I'll tell you a little personal story. I spent 10 years of my life really advocating for a strategic planning unit in the executive office of the Secretary General. I failed. I moved to Japan. I came back about 4 years later, having done nothing, and there was a strategic planning unit in the executive office of the Secretary General. Now, the lesson of this is not don't hire me for your policy ideas. The lesson is that there is a time and a place for everything, and that time and place can be political. It can be a function of a set of people who don't always agree with each other, finding the right moment. But in addition to having the moment, the idea has to be present. If you don't have the idea, if people aren't sensitized, if people aren't informed, you end up with what we always end up with, which is limited change going slowly. Now, third lesson, I guess, of that, people tend to think, and I'd say this particularly academics, though, with the exception of all of the people you've heard tonight who are not the people I'm talking about, the brilliant idea is not the end point. The brilliant idea, in fact, is the starting point. Your presentation can be brilliant. Your speech can be excellent. Your use of cartoons can be fantastic. And that's your 1% of the way there. There is a tremendous amount of work, as we've heard from all the speakers, that goes into understanding needs, understanding what people are looking for, understanding individual incentives, the people around a table who have to make a decision. Believe it or not, policymakers are people too. And so they have their own needs and their own thoughts, and you have to really grapple with that. Understand what shapes them, understand the private, the internal personal currents, the institutional currents, and the public currents. What is it that would compel an institution to take forward your policy idea? Now, if that sounds a little bit more like advocacy than academic research, that's because it is. I deeply believe that academics have a moral obligation to engage with public policy questions, to help policymakers to use evidence to make better decisions, because those decisions They're not just supposed to affect people's lives, they do. Policymakers recognize we know we're not doing a perfect job. We need all the help that we can get, but we need that help to come from you. And I'm afraid it's not happening enough. Why? I think we're missing couples of sets of skills, critical skills in the academic world. And you've heard a talk about people skills. People matter. They're individuals, and we don't see academics getting the time to know policymakers, to really understand what's on their desk, the compressed time frames in which we have to make decisions, how it's all working. In the absence of that understanding and the people skills, nothing really happens. You have a problem of political skills. As I've said, an idea by itself isn't good enough. The idea will only get you so far. What you need is your people around the table to say, yeah, let's move forward on that. How are we going to move forward on that? And then working your way through the bureaucracy from the mid-level all the way up to the top level, so the decision maker reads your brilliant idea and gives you the nod, and then all the way back down to the bottom level so that that nod is actually taken forward. Those of you, and I'm sure there are many of you who've worked in bureaucracies, know that sometimes decisions taken by great and fearless leaders aren't always implemented perfectly by the machinery. So you have to pay attention all the way down, and that's difficult to do. Third, and I think, again, this is a skill that you've heard about, is the ability to communicate. We often have a problem of narrative, a problem of storytelling. An idea can be great. You've done the work. You've sort of figured out who the people are and what our incentives are. But how do you make it matter? How do you make it speak to the problem that we're actually dealing with in a fundamentally human way? And I was browsing the internet last night, and I thought I would look at the top 3 international relations journals. And I picked at random being my 5-year-old picked, the 4th title in every IR journal. International Organization, The Promise of Ontology, Nihilism for a Pluralist World. World Politics, Random or Retributive, Indiscriminate Violence in the Chechen Wars. I mean, yeah, I might read that in about 20 years' time. And then the American Political Science Review. I apologize if one of you is writing for them at the moment. Political Characterology, I don't actually know what that means, on the method of theorizing in Hannah Arendt's Origins of Totalitarianism. Now, look, this is a little bit unfair. She picked either very well or very badly, depending on how you look at it. I think that journals are making a genuine effort, and schools are making more and more of an effort to try and embrace and cross the policy divide. But Houston, we have a problem, right? We're not quite there yet. And I think that the schools and that academia as a whole has to take responsibility for doing research that, as Diane just said, pays attention to the issues, that takes the time. And that, I think, is the second critical challenge, is time, because that's not going to happen just like that. You're not going to sit in a room by yourself and come up brilliantly, or maybe some of you are because you're at Fletcher, the answer to the policy questions that plague us at the United Nations or plague the United States government or your own country. You need to be talking to them. And I wonder if any universities in the world recognize, towards tenure of their faculty, service on a high-level panel at the United Nations. I wonder what percentage of dissertations were written because students went and consulted with policymakers and said, gee, what do you need evidence on? And we would say, well, basically everything. And have that conversation and produce dissertations that actually informed questions in useful ways. And I'm afraid that the answer is simply not enough. But I am loath to blame individual academics, and that is not just because Prof. J got me my first job. It's because I think it's a cultural issue, and that's why I think the problem starts with the deans. The deans, God bless them, they're not here. Oh, hi, Stephen. The deans are the matchmakers of the policy academia dating service. They need to make the space and the time for those relationships to happen and set up the incentive structures in the right way so that academics who do want to engage, as you're all incredibly lucky to have here, can engage. And look, I'll end on a positive note. About 6 months ago, I came up with a group of UN colleagues through a Carnegie-supported event, I think like this one, and we had a serious conversation on questions of legitimacy in political settlements. And the good news is that the conversation was not, oh, what are we doing in an academic setting, or what are these people talking about? It was, this is amazing, this is brilliant, we need to develop this tool. And then there was a little fight in the right-hand side corner between Somalia and South Sudan over who got to pilot the tool first. Now, it hasn't happened yet. For all the problems I've described, the incentives aren't quite right, the politics are problematic, and the process is just slow. But when we can work with you, when we can draw on your expertise, we can do a lot. But we need help, we need time, we need patience, we need a little love. Thank you very much.